Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning,
Morning. Is it?
Good morning.
Morning. Alethea.
Hello, Ambrose. Nice to
Yes.
see you. Looking well,
Yes,
eh?
yes, you too.
Thank you.
I'm happy to see you too.
Thank you.
So Alethea, was the last practice breakfast a good warm up for this one, or not at all?
You set this bar so high, Adina. It's scary.
Really looking forward to it. Hope you're well.
Well, I had to take the whole week off work, and I had quite a few sleepless nights. I'm kind of completely honest.
But you see, I wasn't the only one. It is quite an anxious thing. Suddenly realize that all these people who you're around all the time are now like really invested in listening to you, and suddenly there's this pressure that you never had before. But good luck, Alethea.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. I think we'll just shoot straight to it. Alethea described herself as an architect, wife, mother, and cook. She was born in Cape Town, 1958. Moved to Plat in 1968. Went to Rustenburg High School for Girls in Cape Town. Studied architecture at University of Port Elizabeth, which is Nelson Mandela today. From 1986 to 2009, was an academic, which happened at the same time as practice. Which at the moment she continues to practice, but no longer involved in academia. She assisted me a lot with my thesis when Professor Adebayo was the head of school. So Alethea, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us and just share your journey in architecture. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Simbuza. Yeah, it's a bit overwhelming, to be honest. I hope I don't let myself down. But I really want to thank you for this opportunity to present my architectural journey to you during Women's Month. And I think I'm now supposed to share my screen. Is that correct? Okay, is that all right? So I titled my presentation "Finding a Sense of Place: An Architectural Journey" within the framework of being a woman who has chosen a career in architecture. I selected this image of the design by Ricardo Bofill of La Mariola Roja, drawn by my daughter, this particular image, as the opening symbolized the views to the opportunities to finding a meaning of place. The building also represents a whole lot more, and I'll discuss it later. In terms of my presentation, I'll start off by talking about my childhood, my schooling, my personal trip here as a Rotary Exchange student, my university studies, my life as an academic, and then my life now, which is work, life, play. But before I start that, I'd like to talk about the theory of a sense of place. As a definition, the concept of sense of place is based on the theories of the late Y. Tuan, the father of humanistic geography. His work dealt with the concepts of space, place, and sense of place. This is defined by the notion of places of meaning and memory, and through this, how one forms emotional attachments to one's home, one's neighborhood, and nation. And these are the words that kind of are used by the humanistic geographers. Your place identity, your place dependence, the social interaction that you have with your place attachment, and with the other words, social bonding, nature bonding, sense of belonging, and familiarity. And I think we all can identify with these. He goes on further to suggest that place is security and space is freedom. That we are attached to the one and long for the other. Each of us will experience this differently, and our individual perception of our feelings towards place will vary greatly. And this slide was taken recently here in Plettenberg Bay by one of the local photographers, and I just thought it really emphasizes the sense of freedom as space. What more free could you be as a bird? And then, taking on this theory a bit further, anthropologists Stephen Feld and Keith Basso define a sense of place as the experiential and expressive ways places are known, imagined, yearned for, held, remembered, voiced, lived, contested, and struggled over. My presentation reflects on how my identity has evolved or been influenced by a sense of place. And the screen slide to the left is of my daughters a few years ago in the flowers, just expressing its wonderful sense of freedom and joie de vivre. And on the right is sort of a sense of security, which was in my garden in Durban North. And then the slide in the middle talks more to this idea of what a sense of place or space really is, which is community, it's your attachment, your identity, which I've already mentioned. And then the individual self, which is your self-identification, your belief, the place where we live, the country where we live, and that takes on even more other ideas of ecology. We've got global warming, all these concerns that can affect our sense of space, and all the other aspects that we can consider as architects. But where did it all start? Well, I was born in Cape Town, the third daughter to a family of 4 girls, and grew up in the suburb of Pineland. Ours was a typical white, yet liberal-thinking, middle-class family. When we talk about our identity and who we are, I sometimes call myself a mongrel of Europe. My family identity is one of Irish, French, Dutch, Greek, and English heritage. So I'm a little bit of everything. The picture on the left is my late mother holding me as a child. The picture on the right is my youngest sister, Caroline, who's a good 8 years younger than I am. And then of my father and my 2 older sisters. So we had quite a big age gap between us girls. And so it was almost like for many years I was the youngest child, and then along came my baby sister, who I do adore, and we have a very close relationship. And then I want to talk a little bit first about talking about Pinelands as a suburb and growing up there. The design of this, and I think again this comes back to how we associate our place and space with where we've grown up and how that has influenced us. And the Garden City Plan, for those of you who have done your course here, urban design, and I'm glad Ambrose is with us today because I know he'll say something too. And understanding my sense of place as a child, we can talk about how environmental psychologists have emphasized the quantified link between exposure to natural environments and environmental preferences later in life. The special bond which develops between children and their childhood environments has been called a primal landscape by human geographers and forms a key point of comparison for considering subsequent places later in life. And having grown up in Pinelands, which was the first suburb in South Africa to be based on the town planning concept of Sir Ebenezer Howard, the Garden City Plan of Pinelands is based on the design for Letchworth Garden City by Raymond Unwin and Barry Parker. The town planning scheme for Pinelands was designed by Albert Thompson, who had worked for Unwin. And of course, it has all these elements that make up what the Garden City Plan identifies, which is a link to the city, but also the separateness of community and what makes up a community in terms of open spaces, green paths, narrow streets, walkable distances, and an environmental quality of life. And so in comparison, we have both Durban North and Pinelands, and the irony is that I ended up living in Durban North, which was designed by Albert Thompson on the Garden City Plan. And these two plans show you the layout and the concept of these really not many parallel streets, but more curvilinear, and then diagonal elements leading to sort of community buildings, whether it's a hall or a school or a church or a shopping node. And both of these suburbs have these elements that make up the Garden City Plan. So growing up in a suburb, that was designed with a sense of place as its core, with parks, green belts, and designated community buildings, which are all within walkable distance in the 1960s, provided a real sense of safety for a child. From the age of 6, I would ride my bike to Brownies, and that's the Brownie Hall in the top left, unaccompanied, or trottle to ballet classes, and attend my Sunday school in a little quaint little church on the right. Yes, it was distinctly a life of privilege, but what I realized even at a very young age, that I could appreciate the defined character of the suburb, and one which was designed with a human scale and a sense of community. This would be my space of freedom, as defined by Twan. Furthermore, this would inevitably be the subliminal reason that when we moved to Durban in 1996, I chose to live in Durban North, which of course, as mentioned, is another Garden City suburb. And then, at the age of 10, my world was upended. My father, at the age of 40, had suffered a heart attack. His physician encouraged him to have a complete lifestyle change, and we moved from Cape Town to the coastal town of Plettenberg Bay, where my parents bought a small farm. And these slides I'm showing you is Plettenberg Bay in the 1960s. It was a little village. It was still a fishing village. It wasn't a holiday destination as it has become today, nor the playground of the rich and famous. The biggest adjustment I had to make moving to Plet in 1968 was a change to a rural life and attending school in a village with a total population of no more than 2,000 people, and that is inclusive of all the people living in the town. But it would be the beautiful bay encompassed by the sea, the sky, the forests and mountains, which has undeniably become my anchor both then and now, as defined as my primal landscape. And I just need to mention that the little school on the left, which I attended, had exactly 2 classrooms. We had no playing fields, we had no swimming pool, our swimming pool was the sea, and our track field was the beach. And having come from Cape Town, and again, as I said, I acknowledge my life of privilege. I went to a private little girls' school, the children whose parents were ambassadors, etc. And I ended up in a little school with 2 classrooms, girls and boys, English and Afrikaans, 2 teachers only. The headmaster was our class teacher, and we sat in rows. Our actual classrooms were our rows. So in fact, grade 2, what's that? Grade 5, or I'm trying to get myself back from standards to grade. You sat in your row, and as you moved up years, you got to sit next to the window. So by the time you got to grade 7, you got the window seats and could stare out at the sea and have a wonderful daydream. I mean, it was really a culture shock in that you had to be friends with everybody. You didn't have a choice, because if you weren't, you would have no friends. In my class, in grade 7, there were 4 English-speaking children and 6 Afrikaans-speaking children. And it didn't matter if you were English or Afrikaans, you just had to be friends. That was how it was. And then for high school, I had to return to Cape Town because there was no high school in Plettenberg Bay at the time. And again, it was this cartwheel where you flip from one side to the other, from a little rural village back to school with 400 girls, and being a boarder, and again finding your sense of place and self-worth. And kind of where did this idea to study architecture come from? I spent many hours as a child designing my Lego fantasies, and in high school on the endless weekends of being a boarder, designing make-believe houses for my friends. And I used to get commissioned by my girls, come on, I need a nice, beautiful home for when I grow up. Again, with due consideration to my privilege, I attended a school where one was expected to have a career. It wasn't a case of if, but rather one of what career would you pursue. However, please be reminded that was 1976, and as a girl dreaming of becoming an architect, this was still considered unusual. When I finished matric, I was selected to go on Rotary Youth Exchange to the United States of America. Another turn of the cartwheel in my life. It was a time where I could grow in confidence and resolve to study architecture. And again, I moved to a town called North Platte, Nebraska, which you could take a dart and throw it in the United States of America, which some of you might want to do because of their politics and their nonsense. It was dead center. It was the epicenter of agricultural life in America. It was middle America. It was everything conservative America represents. And again, another shock to the system. But it was actually a good place to find who I wanted to be and what I would do with my life. So moving on, I ended up studying, sorry, my slide's a little bit out of sequence. It's what happens when you work late at night, as we all know how we do that as architectural students. I ended up studying at the then University of Port Elizabeth, not by choice, but rather at my parents' insistence. They felt I'd been at boarding school for too long, and I'd been in America for too long, and Port Elizabeth was the closest city or town to Plettenberg Bay, and it was in those days a 3-hour commute, and not the 8-hour drive that Cape Town was in those days. Now with all the new roads and what have you, it is closer. But they thought they'd see more of me. So I wasn't happy with their decision, and more importantly, I had no place attachment. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the city. I just spent a year overseas finding myself and finding more about who I was. And Port Elizabeth, Alberta, was not on my radar. I certainly was an angry teenager. There was more to this. It was verklempt, and for those of you who don't know what verklempt is, it's a good old Afrikaans word for conservative, narrow-mindedness, and everything that's wrong with it. It lacked diversity, and I did not identify with what the university stood for as an extension of the Broederbond. So I battled on, and my disenchantment spilled over, and I failed my second year, which was a real shock to the system. Probably one of the reasons why, as an academic, I so enjoyed lecturing to the second year, because I think I actually got them. I spent the following year out of varsity and returned to Plet, where I worked for a small firm of architects, father and father. It was just what I needed. One can get ready to find me, or you can overcome your perceived injustices. I returned a year later, once again to be the only girl in my class of 20. So this is some slides of me as a student, graduating, working behind the drawing board, because we definitely did not have computers, let alone fax machines, let alone anything. All your notes were rollioed. You had slides instead of PowerPoint. Some of the boys in my class, top left, and then bottom right, working in the studio. I think they're doing a bottle of wine in the corner, chips, junk food, everything that goes with being a student. So by now, postmodernism has held sway. It was the era of postmodernism. We'd all broken free from the modern movement, which Robert Stern, when we attended a conference at UCT when I was a student, we all jumped into our cars, drove down furiously to Cape Town to go and hear the master of Permo talking. He used this wonderful word, banal. And it was the first time I'd ever heard it used, and I had to go look it up in the dictionary. And of course, by that stage, we all thought that modernism was banal. Of course, we'd learned our lesson, because Permo really did become a little bit too much. But what postmodernism did was it gave us an alternative view to how we design buildings. On the bottom right is Venturi's mother's house with its split pediment giving a shot out at eclecticism. The Piazza di Italia on the left, designed by Charles Moore, would demonstrate how interventionist public space could be inclusive, whilst others saw it as pure kitsch. It was all in response to the tedium of the late modern architecture, and embedded in this was the beginning of the recognition of vernacular architecture, critical regionalism, and a contextual approach to design, underpinned by the writings of Christopher Alexander's The Platinum Language. And those of you I taught secondary in the audience remember how much I used to go on about the Platinum Language, and Christian Norbert Schultz's theory of a genius loci, all of which greatly influenced me. And of course, the color palette of postmodern architecture, and the pink. We've got to talk about the pink later on. And then in my third year, the then PG Glass competition was held, a national competition for the then only 6 schools of architecture. I had something to prove, and my design for an intervention in the city centre of Alberta was the winning design. It was a flamboyant Permo-style building, using false facades and elements borrowed from Venturi and Charles Moore. Rather deliberate and obvious, aren't they? I was the only female student to be a finalist in the competition, This was considered groundbreaking. I received many letters of congratulations, and in particular the one in the bottom right, which I still hold dear, from Kansha Gedish, who was then the head of school at Wits University. For some reason, being a girl, to win this competition resonated, and I found myself being interviewed by all the newspapers. And the side on the left is actually of the building that I designed, with its pediment, with its false facade, with the copy from the Piazza di Italia, the square, with intervention building, linking old and new, and trying to revive the city centre of back then of Port Elizabeth. And it's sad to think that this has continued to degenerate over the years. And then there, me, of course, on the left with my big glasses and my permed hair, which was all the rage in those days. And then when I started lecturing, the students then found this article in the South African Institute of Architectural Journal, and they stuck it up in the studio, much to my embarrassment. But anyway, I was very proud to win that competition, and it did make a big impact on my life. And then just talking a bit more about the building, I just wanted to include this because it was the colours again, the pinks, the blues. Gosh, we did have fun. And I think the thing about postmodern architecture, and I'm sure I'm going to get asked questions about it, is how it did become a pastiche, how it did become applied ornament. And that's really when it started degenerating to other things. But before I move on to that slide, I now was going to speak about a little bit about alienation. And part of completing my B.Arch degree, and also about being a woman as an architect. I went to work for a firm of architects, which for the first time in my life as an architect, was from being a student, I felt alienated. I felt marginalized as a woman. This othering felt intentional, as I was placed in a separate office, whilst all the men and students who worked for the firm shared an office and could work together. And this isolation was really was bothering. And it was almost like the firm said to themselves, well, what do you do with a woman architect now that we have one? Needless to say, I did not stay long. I went back to university where I felt safe and respected. I then registered for my master's degree in architecture. My topic was the early modern movement, Port Elizabeth, a case study. Franco Foscuro was my supervisor, and Wally Peters was my external examiner. Here again, I was the first female, in fact the first person, to obtain my master's degree in architecture at the University of Port Elizabeth. And these buildings here are included because they are sort of art moderne. The one on the left was designed by Claire Brinkman, who was the first woman architect to graduate in South Africa, and she was from Port Elizabeth. She designed the name of the house. I did write it on my side. And then influenced by quite directly the work of Eric Mendelssohn, who was practicing in Germany at the time. And again, the influence of early modern architecture in Port Elizabeth was very much influenced by the motor car industry, the idea of being modern, of modernity, and collating and creating a case study of early modern architecture in Port Elizabeth was, as I said, the topic of my thesis. And with that under my belt, I was able to then start my academic career. I started with a tutor at UKZN. I started by teaching history of architecture as a part-time lecturer whilst doing my master's, and then being employed at the PE Technikon, which was later assimilated into UPE and became part of now Nelson Mandela University. Again, working at the PE Technikon, I was the only woman on the staff, but it was good grounding, and so began my 21 years in academia. And then in 1994, we decided, well, we'd always wanted to go overseas, we'd always wanted to live overseas, and by that stage we thought, well, as good a time as any. Bad idea. We moved to Vancouver, and we stayed only for 2 years. We arrived in Durban in 1996, as I said, by way of Vancouver, Canada. And in the space of 2 years, we had left Port Elizabeth, moved to Vancouver, where my second daughter was born. I lectured there as well, part-time at a private school of architecture. And I went back to work when my daughter was only 3 months old. We returned to South Africa for my late mother-in-law's funeral. And arriving back in my happy place, which is Pet, it was here that my husband said that he had no intention of returning to Canada. It came to me as no surprise. The opposite of a sense of place is placelessness. It is usually used in the context of those places that have no special relationship. We normally talk about shopping malls, fast food chains, those sort of places that kind of are too common in our global context in which we find ourselves and how we live. I use this term in the sense that living in Vancouver, which is beautiful as you can see from these slides, I yearned for home. I felt placeless, as though I had no attachment. Our daughter Emma, who was only 2.5 at the time, said to us, "I have no family," and that really was heartbreaking. For all its geographic beauty, the people of Vancouver had no interest in another immigrant moving to their city, and I had no sense of identity, history, or the ties to bind me. So we arrived in Durban in the typical hot Durban summer, humid, subtropical, again, another cartwheel in my life, after the cold and rain of Vancouver. Again, not knowing many people. I think I had 3 friends and Wally Peters, who I knew before I arrived. I applied and was appointed as lecturer and then later promoted to senior lecturer. And in addition to the service program director for 6 years, of the total 13 years I spent at the school, it was a time of transformation and change. And I just included these slides because of the vibrancy, diversity of Durban, the wonderful spirited architecture. We've got Barry Bierman's house on the left, and I know it's under so much threat at the moment. Norman Eason's lovely Nedbank building, Betsy Benjamin's playful architecture, and Paul Mikula's back centre, and of course, for our diversity with colourful, vibrant colours of the Hindu temple. But I had to include this wonderful slide of all the staff circa 2000, and I recognize a few people. Michelle standing next to Ambrose, I'm on Ambrose's left. Kevin behind me, Joe Fonseca in the far corner, Derek Wang, and Kelly Aspinall, Kevin Bingham, and I were the new kids on the block in 1996, and we had loads of fun. We started teaching together in 3rd year, I then moved on to 1st year with Kelly, and I finally settled in teaching in 2nd year. During my tenure, I taught design, theory, and history. It was the era of problem-based learning. Many of the older students resisted this teaching methodology. They did not like critiquing each other's work. They did not like working in groups. They did not like generating their own design briefs. Anyway, it was all interesting. And Kelly introduced the image assessment system of marketing, which is still used today. And in fact, it's been taken on board by quite a few schools of architecture throughout the country, from those of our students who later on became academics. But there's a season for everything. And by 2009, it was time for change. I took a 3-year break from architecture. I spent time with my girls and with my husband, who was working in the Free State. And then in 2012, I received a call from one of my previous clients, and they were excited to tell me that they wished to design a home for them in Zimbiti. That shoved me out of my hiatus and got me back into practice. So when Skura phoned and invited me to give this presentation, and he said, "Oh, just photobomb everyone with some of your work." Well, Skura, it takes a whole lot more than photobombing. Lots of sleepless nights, as I've mentioned already, and what to say, etc. Waking up in the night, "Oh, I need to include that slide. Oh, I need to think about that." And the awful, awful reality of showing one's work to others. So this is my photobomb of some of my projects, both past and present. And going back to postmodern architecture, I finished university in 1984, finished my degree in 1984, and everyone was, still in this mad postmodern rush of things. On the left are John Rushmer's onion row building is on the right, the cover of the equivalent of the UKZ, your the journal, our journal, okay. And Meredith. And we had this one whole magazine about Como and writing about and reflecting and talking about what Como was. And so my first house I designed was built as our own home in Port Elizabeth. And it was a typical postmodern design, I have to be honest. But I was completely enamored with Peter Rich's house that he designed, which was a remodeling of a house in West Dean, with its flamboyant white plaster molding, its green roof, which was so nouveau at that time. It was long before Mount Edgecombe and all its green roofs. His references to Indobailey architecture, and I was completely in love with that building. And so, designing my own house, I had to coat it with a white plaster band, and I had to have all my pastiche and all my decoration and referencing settler architecture in the Eastern Cape. The slide in the bottom left is again about access and entrance and volume and opening space and going through space. And we have this beautiful garden, which is on the edge of the Barkham's Valley. And the interesting thing about this site was that when I was doing my master's and doing my research, I was driving around from street by street, collating and looking for these early modern houses. And I came across this empty site, this vacant stand. I couldn't believe that Warmer, there was still a vacant stand in this old suburb. I rushed home, grabbed my husband, brought him back, and I said, I found us a site. Now, we weren't planning to build a house. We had no intention of, we were immigrating. We were moving on. That was in 1986. And built our first home. And it was a privilege to have the opportunity to build my own home at the young age of, I think I was 30. Anyway, more about postmodern architecture. It was the time when everything was colorful, everything was decorated, everything was prestige. But you still had a good sense of planning. If I look at the design that I did, a client, again, probably in 1988 or 89, thereabout. A sense of entrance, sense of arrival, sense of moving through, a balance of spaces, and this is one of my buildings, early postmodern buildings. And then this second house, this client had seen our house, she loved it. I had to design one just like mine for her, and so it becomes what I see a repeat element in all my buildings are these gables. And actually now I'm thinking now when I do any more houses, I've got to get rid of gables. But the sense of light, sense of space, place making, the side on the left was actually her pottery studio, and her bedroom looked down into through the glass windows, and it was all courtyard, arrival, all those elements that we all use and apply in our building. And then I come to the Zimbiti years, as I call them, where I was invited and had the opportunity to design many of the grey buildings, grey roofs. It's scary how we have this rocky rifle of architecture we compare to and conform to. And then you can have some fun with planning and looking at spaces and climate and the influence of how you enter a building, how you use your building. And when I design, I'm very inclusive. I always engage my clients. They're always part of the journey of the home that I'm creating for them, because it is about them and it's not about me, and they have to live in that house. Playing with roofscapes, playing with, like always, sense of arrival, left of the bedrooms, right, all pattern language, good pattern language, getting light from different sides, creating intimate spaces, and identity for clients. And then you have clients who want something alternative with the monolith, if you're more sort of modern, also at Zimbiti. So these are all the Zimbiti grey houses. And then a house you spend a year on with a client, which never gets built because their dreams are greater than their budget. And I think we've all had that experience. And you sort of have to let go of the baby at the end of the year because it's not going to happen. And I think we've all experienced that disappointment too. And then this is the house where the client phoned me and said, please come and design our house for us in Zimbiti. And again, courtyard space. Zimbiti gets lots of wind, so you need courtyards where you can gather or move and choose where you spend your time outdoors because it's Durban, the climate allows this outdoor living, and there's opportunity for experiencing afternoon sunlight, getting a shade, shading devices, screening devices, which are all very much important in the landscape of Durban architecture. And then coming back to this idea of notion of screens, of courtyard, of privacy, but also being able to indoor outdoor, for example, this bathroom, bit of texture in the building. And then moving on from Zimbiti, because I think I was very lucky and fortunate to get to design many houses there. Gowrie, which is a house I'm busy completing at the moment. Gowrie Farm, an H-shaped plan, because at Gowrie you have to design with the letters of the alphabet. Again, Rocky Wise still filling and ticking the boxes. Playing with roofscape and big, beautiful volumetric in the main living area. Creating two spaces to live in, the one overlooking with their pool and the other more private area at the back, depending on the weather. And then moving to Plets, sort of starting my first so-called beach house. Nothing about a beach house about this one, but this is Joburg clients for you, wanting big homes, 5 bedrooms, all en suite. But trying to still use climate, use view, use spaces, linking outdoor to the indoor, in this example. And then a repeat client who's just bought a house in Franschhoek, and sorry, a site in Franschhoek, phones me up and says, oh, I've already cast the slab, it's 35 meters long by 8 meters wide, and we are downsizing. So we've got a steel portal frame that you have to use, so just make sure it fits in with the design. And the overall height is 8.5 meters, and you've got a 22-degree pitch. And I'm going, oh, 22-degree pitch, what can I do with that? Anyway, this is what we're working on currently as well, this house in Franschhoek on the farm. And again, it's a huge, sorry, I can't defend this, it is a big home. And then also looking at elements in our designs, playing with feeling spaces, playing with volumetrics, all are part of some understanding the sense of space and place that you create for your clients. And then during COVID, what did we all do during COVID? My gosh, it was a time, wasn't it? And I decided I love cooking, I love entertaining. It's my other half of me, and those of you who know me, and I love entertaining, and that's probably from my Greek heritage. And I gave cooking classes every Friday on Zoom. My husband was my videographer, and I took my friends and those friends of friends who joined my classes on a journey around the world, and it was so much fun. It was one way of avoiding the tedium and the what COVID brought to all of us. And then, of course, as I call it, the ontploffing. And I hope I don't cry again. I cried yesterday, and I'm going to try and control myself. Deep breath. Okay. Please bear with me. I'm going to actually read a journal entry I made about the looting of the 11th July. And I called it The Ties That Bind. I have spent the past 2 days trying to process Mr. 13th of July, 2 days after the looting, the meaningless looting of our personal belongings. If I start at the storage warehouse, which is a large structural box, an amorphous building mass that typifies big box architecture, I wonder if it were a building that has signifiers. Would a looter hell-bent on destruction have any feeling of discomfort from wondering? Is it easier to loot things from a place that has no identity? Does this as a consequence compute into the contempt, the anger, and the dangerous frustration of knowing that these structures hold goods that you cannot attain? Are we as a society so damaged, so desensitized by our circumstances, that our sense of self-worth is utterly misshapen and distorted by the poverty around us. And like these ignominious contemporary monolithic structures that too have no identity, no architectural value, does it make it easier to switch off at the critical point of no return? No guiding hand, no conscience to preempt this does the looting become excusable as a consequence of the unbearable frustration that a capitalist society which does not provide for your basic needs. Living in South Africa with all its trials and tribulations, we know these things. I feel it every time I see a beggar or someone digging for food in a bin. You see them, but you don't. You don't look or engage, because if you do, then you do have to see and feel their pain and anguish. So you disengage. You allow shitty box architecture to prevail and squatter camps to be the norm. And as an architect, design hard within the ghetto community to complete the domestic picture that circumscribes how we live. On Tuesday, the 11th of July, my personal belongings became part of this dystopia, the scrapyard to forage through, to stampede, to annihilate. It is sheer coincidence that our belongings were still in storage at a removal company warehouse until such time as we could bring it to Plet. It is a temporary decision, not cast in stone, because we hadn't really decided to move to Plet then. So the very things that should be with us are not. As a consequence, we became a statistic of the inglorious week that has passed. In this observation, I want to express that the possessions we have lost are the ties that bind us as a family, and not limited to, but very much part of, the connectivity that goes back to my own childhood, and how the possessions that we have lost are all our connections to one another, and in part, an expression of our identity as a family. The fine strands of our lives that were captured in photographs, with the baby book put together by my mother, or the photographs of our girls, my late mother's tea set, painting, books, all my lecture notes, all my architectural drawings. The list goes on and on. As a postscript, I cried for a week. I then made a decision that I would not let this define me. I now live with furniture and paintings that belong to my late mother-in-law, and for which I'm grateful. And in the end, it is all just stuff. I chose to forgive, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, forgiveness is not an occasional act, it is a permanent attitude. The irony is, by moving into my late mother-in-law's house here in Plet, there was so much stuff to sift through and give away, which I have done. Countless carloads of donations, and this too was therapeutic. And now to have a little bit of lightheartedness, because we all do need to have a little laugh sometimes at ourselves, and hence why I'm wearing pink. I decided and dared myself to include this in my talk today. So Barbie, the movie about a doll with all the wrong physical attributes, that has become overnight a cult movie. When my daughters told me they were going to go to the movie, I told them they were actually absolutely mad, and what on earth were they doing going to see a movie about Barbie? Well, Emma, my older daughter, said, Mum, do some research. And to my amazement, I discovered that as a symbol, Barbie was in fact a real feminist, created to inspire young girls to become whoever or whatever she dreamed to be. But more importantly, Barbie's first house on the left, which is a little cardboard house, was designed as a modernist version of contemporary Malibu 1960s architecture. Yet her house had no kitchen, because then she was a modern woman. She didn't have to cook. She didn't have to be a housewife, and she certainly didn't even have to have children. She owned her own home and was an open plan designer. She was a career woman, a modern woman, a gloriously independent woman. And we all should wear a little bit of pink to remind ourselves that as women, and not only Women's Month, that we are allowed to dream, to be who we want to be. And I just thought it was quite interesting that the house is a little cardboard house, but it all packaged up into this suitcase on the bottom right, and was able to unfold. Look at the the detail outside, and it was very much based on those early modern movement houses, sorry, in California. And then that takes me on to my next concern: where to from here? What scares me about the future is artificial intelligence. When you look at some of the architectural renders posted on Instagram, the surreal settings that appear to bind Faustian ideal, and whereby the manipulator of the AI app creates a utopian form of escapism, or is this going to be our new reality? And these are two renders done of pseudo Cape Dutch houses in the Cape. I'm a little bit lost. And then going back to my first slide of Ricardo Bofill's losing myself. His La Muralla Roja in Barcelona. And it epitomizes for me this ideal sense of place and the spaces between, and how he designed a building in glorious pink, and the sense of community that he creates. And when we look at housing, are these not ways we can try and create a sense of identifiers, how we can create community, how we can create a sense of place when we design? And then I need to say thank you to my friend, who lives here in Cape and designed this building called the Spaces Between. And I think when we look at that discussion about the spaces between, I also want to think about not just the places and spaces of which we identify, but what about those spaces between, the ones that we don't always see or acknowledge or feel or think about? And this is a yoga studio that she's designed here in Cape, on this magnificent site overlooking what's called the wild side of Robert. And she is very much into ecological architecture and treading lightly on the earth. And I admire a lot of her work. And then this is where I live now. I live in a small house overlooking the sea. It has no architectural merit. It has no defining elements of access and entrance and any of those things that we always speak about and write about and talk about. But it's home. But what I do wake up to every day is on the right-hand side, this magnificent view. And I am very privileged and grateful that I'm able to live in such a spectacular place, and that I have been able to come home and live and be happy here. And then just by way of gratitude, my family, my husband Alan, who I've been married to for 38 years, who puts up with me and all my architectural hijinks and all goings on. And my beautiful daughters, Emma and Claire. Emma on the left, who is a great artist. She's a town planner that works as a graphic designer now in London, which was her first degree. And my daughter Claire on the right, sorry, on my left, who I want to thank because she had the courage to go back to Biddulph on her own and find some of my architectural practice scattered on the ground. So she really did me a huge favor, a great act of kindness. And that's my talk. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my life journey with you today. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Alethea. And because you flowed so well, I just decided I'm not going to interrupt at all. It was a well planned talk, and I think it was flowing quite nicely. Thank you so much, and for just sharing your heart. I think that's all. That was very special. How did it feel, Alethea, when you were studying and being the only female in the class? And I mean, when you started also your career, there were not many females at the time. How did that feel for you?
Well, I think, you know, and I guess architects generally have a side to them that is very empathetic and kind. And most of us, you know, we have to understand people. And I was just fortunate that the guys in my class were they were kind people and very embracing, and they weren't stereotypical and saying, "Oh, you're a girl, what are you doing here?" He did get that from people outside who were saying, "What are you studying?" "Oh, and I'm studying architecture." "Well, why would you want to do that? You're going to get married with him, before you even finish your degree, and you're going to have children before. Well, no, I didn't. I only had my children in my 30s. I was going to be a career woman, and I think you earn respect too by just acknowledging and part of. And I think, no, it was the work situation was hard. When I went and worked for the first firm of architects, and I guess if we'd had Instagram and Facebook and all those things back in the day, I would have done more research and realized it wasn't a good fit. And that's why I went running back to varsity, because I couldn't quite really cut those apron strings. But it was also good to do that because I was then able to pursue being a life an academic, which is really what I really wanted to be. I really, really wanted to be a lecturer. It was kind of my whole goal. And I'd started tutoring in fourth year, which like most universities do offer that opportunity. And I just realized that's really what I want to do. I actually wanted to be an academic. So it worked well. In fact, not being happy working on the firm of architects, because it gave me an opportunity to pursue what I really wanted to pursue.
Okay, no, great. And then the house in Warman, I find it quite neat, and cluttered, true to the postmodern principles. When you're designing your own house, how easy is it to be an architect? Because now you also have your husband inputting there. How easy was it to go with your instinct as an architect for that being your home?
What was interesting about that particular site was that there were foundations on it. So the previous owner had already started building a house for themselves, and they'd obviously overspent their budget and couldn't afford to finish. They'd spent lots of money on the foundations, and it was quite a steep site. And so my husband said to me, "Well, we can buy it as long as you can design a house to fit on those foundations." And I went like, "Okay," deep breath. And it had a 6-meter wide section, and it had a 3-meter, 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 which was going to be like a jacuzzi and who knows what. And then it had another sort of platform, which was lower down. And so I just manipulated those. It was almost like I was given this module that I could work with. So the 6-meter on the right was for the garage. I turned that into the garage. It was going to, I think, have been their kitchen or something. I just don't remember. And then the center part was the entrance. So everything was quite, our kitchen was next to that 3 meters wide. So everything was on this little narrow 3-meter module, which was the lounge dining area. But when we built it, in those days, you could get a 50,000 Rand bond as a first-time homeowner. So we couldn't build the whole house because we needed to do it in sections in order to afford the first-time homeowner's bond. So that was also quite part of the interesting part of the journey. And then my husband built the house because he's in construction. And so we were homeowner builders as well, which was quite tricky, let me be honest. But in terms of the design, he let me do what I wanted to do. He didn't enforce any, and he never has. He's always let me create and do what I want to do. But it was a real privilege to be able to design my own home at such a young age. It really was. I was very fortunate. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And then congratulations on that competition as a student. I think those memories stay on for forever, right?
I'd forgotten about it. That was just so funny about it. Yeah, and it was one of the things that Claire found was this little folder of all my competition, and I was like, how did she find that amongst? I mean, you saw those photographs, and it was just horrific. I never went. My husband went up to them to go and find some of our stuff, and I think we found about 20% of our belongings. But how she found that, I don't know, but she did, and I'm really grateful to her. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Alethea. Any questions, any comments for Alethea? While I wait for anybody else to speak, Alethea, how do you find this scenario when I heard you talking about the client's dream versus their budget, which doesn't always match. How do you find convincing a client that your house is actually not going to be 5 million, it's going to be 10 million straight away? And somehow you almost feel like you always should be more conservative, but you can't be. If you've done a sketch, you give it to the QS, even if they do a high level estimate just per square meter. You know, you get a number that's to you like, I know they're not gonna like this. I know they're not gonna like this cost. But I mean, it's very important to just be upfront with them and say it's not gonna cost 5 million. It's not. How do you find balancing that? Because
it's very difficult.
You always, as an architect, you feel guilty that I wish it was cheaper, but it's professional to just tell them, look, it's going to be 10 million.
Skira, you are
especially
so right.
houses, especially houses.
Yeah, no, houses, it's really hard. I mean, Noma, she said to me when we were doing one of the validations, she said to me, Alethea, what on earth are you doing designing houses? That's the worst part of architecture. You end up being a psychologist, you end up being the marriage
counselor. Marriage counselor. Because there's two views. There's a couple. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, then you've also become the financial advisor too, because you know I'm busy pricing that 5-bedroom ensuite house that we're going to start building soon, and I know we're over budget already, and she won't listen. The client will not listen. She's adamant she's going to build this house, and you know probably, and I don't know if it's a status thing or what, but anyway, she will build the house, and it's going to cost her a whole lot more than, as you say, it's going to cost 8 to 10 million. And then, you know, then you do get, I just wish I could get some more humble plans sometimes. I shouldn't say that too loudly, but, you know, I think you end up with, you know, I'd love to design a small little courtyard house, for example, a little special little place rather than a 5-bedroom ensuite home. But it is difficult. And it does, I mean, I've got that project in Gari, it's all kind of going south at the moment because of the final account coming in, and I didn't actually, because I wasn't in Durban, I didn't actually manage that side of the project at all. And you know, the client is now, you know, blaming and shaming the QS, and I'm kind of going, but you got your monthly certificates, you know, you knew what you were in for each month anyway. So it can become difficult and tricky. I can't really answer your question.
It's a tricky one because somehow as a designer you feel guilty that the house is getting more expensive or whatever, but it is the client's requirements.
Yeah, and if you try and shrink it, they get cross with you. Like when you say, no, but I mean, let's leave this one. Then they get cross with you. Like, you know, why are you doing that? I want that. You know, so it becomes really
exactly. Yeah. All right. I find it quite. I don't do a lot of houses, to be honest.
Good idea.
But I find it trickier when I do, because I do a house every now and then, but I don't do a lot of them. I have not managed to make them work in terms of profit when you do a house that much.
Yeah, I think if I had my life,
unless it's got a huge size.
Yeah, if I had my life journey over again, I don't think I'd do a house design.
You would again.
I don't think I would.
Yeah. Okay, Kevin, then Najima.
Yeah, thanks, Guru, and hi, Alethea. Thanks for a very well presented presentation. That's, as with all of your lectures, you put a lot of effort into the preparation and the presentation as well. So well done, and thank you. Lovely to see it all combined into one talk. I just wanted to pick up on the word that you said earlier about when we met and started teaching together in '96. The word fun. It was an incredible amount of fun those early years, '96 through onwards to over 2000, and it was each of us, Kelly, yourself, and I had our own skills, and I think that each brought it to a class that I see some of the names of the students that are online now, and I think the output of students over that period of time bought into that teaching as much as many of them wouldn't have liked the problem-based learning thing. So I think it was a very good period for the school. I think the outputs, as I said earlier, in the students and seeing the work that they're doing nowadays, I think is a credit both to the school, to leadership of the school, and to our teaching that we had at that time. I was going to ask a question. Skura mentioned your student project. I was going to ask if you had a flashing detail for the edge of that roof along where old meets new.
I very much doubt it, Kevin.
Thanks very much, Alethea. Very well done.
Thanks, Kevin.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Kevin. Rem Koolhaas said he's always worried about the bigger picture. He doesn't care how the roof meets the wall. Adima?
Yeah, first, I guess just to commend you, Alethea, on the presentation this morning, and I suppose in a way reflecting on this idea of a woman's journey, because I think I touched on it when I spoke. That Skura said, "Oh, it's coincidental that your talk takes place in Women's Month. I'm going to line up Alethea next, and then it would be this incredible kind of narrative around August." And a part of it made my skin crawl, because I detest the idea of the necessity of having to occupy women's spaces, purely because I think generationally, and not that it's a bad thing, Skura, by the way, purely because I think generationally, before me, there was this idea of and or, like you had to choose. You had to choose whether to be this embodiment of what is, I suppose, a masculine kind of role as a woman, and negate these other kind of feminine attributes of family making and homemaking and childbearing, and all of that, I suppose, is associated. But I think what I've really gleaned from the women's space, and particularly in your presentation today, is the capacity and the desire, and most importantly, the ability to do both, and how so much of the two interplay into each other, how so much feminine characteristics feed into the softness that is lacking from spaces, and how so much of the softness is necessary in the perspective. And I think this idea of spaces between is so important, because we are always taught principally about the hard line and where to draw the hard line. And so just a commendation on that, to you and to so many others who I suppose have demonstrated the capacity to do both, and to do both, I suppose, with so much grace and strength, because I think those two things were very clear in your presentation. So thank you for that. And then I guess the question that I have is around, I suppose, a feminine approach, or the idea of feminine characteristics and their place in engaging in places like housing estates, where guidelines are so principled and unnecessarily hard. I mean, I had a bit of a chuckle when you mentioned the houses need to take the form of alphabet. What your insight is into navigating those spaces. I mean, we at the Institute are constantly, very often met with the challenges around how closed they are. And I suppose maybe just if you could talk a little bit more on your experience of navigating those spaces, and how you feel about them in general, I suppose, in the context of this idea of the construction of spaces between, and any future projections on the idea of space. Thanks, Alethea.
Thanks, Adima.
Yeah. Working in an estate is not never be my first choice. It just kind of fell into my lap in a way that I didn't expect, and it is so rigid. And then you find that what I found in ZEDS and BT, I could have more expression and develop more expression in the planning of the building than perhaps necessarily in the envelope of the building. The envelope of the building, I could, you would prescribe that the roof pitch has to be a certain pitch, that the roof color has to be a certain color, that the windows and the overhangs, it's very prescriptive. And so I found that for myself, and again, maybe it's the womanly side to it, is that I love designing space. I love problem solving, how it all fits together, and how people can live and celebrate a life within their home. And I really do work very much hands-on with my clients, probably to my detriment, where I let them interfere quite a bit. But I think that's also the nature of designing homes for people, where you want them to identify with their home. So it's not necessarily always what you want as the architect, but more with the client. And that's how my first approach has always been. And then, you're the guiding hand, in a sense. But all my hard is I've always realized I've got, a defined sense of entry. That if you go back to defensible space, what does a defined sense of entry mean? It means, who do you let in beyond your front door? Who do you let into your privacy, into your private realm? And once they're inside, how far do you let them penetrate into your private realm? Which is, do you let them go into your living spaces? And how you let them interact in your living spaces. So that kind of goes back, harks back to, the pattern language, which I spoke about earlier, which did really influence me a lot as a young student and as a young architect when I first started practicing, because it became my sort of Bible to how to design in a sense and think about people. And so I think as a woman architect, I'm always concerned about the person and how they fit into their home and how they live in their home. And then providing a choice in the house. For example, so again, coming back to the planning as opposed to necessarily the envelope, is when you plan, again, for Durban, the climate is so, it gives you so much direction because you've got to design for the climate. You've got to provide the screening. You've got to provide sort of high volume so you can get the air to circulate up and flow out. You need to provide different indoor-outdoor spaces, and I always make sure there's never just one outdoor space, but there's a choice. You can perhaps go sit on the north side of the house or on the west or the east, not necessarily the west, but get out of the wind and sit on the other side of the home, so that when you can live indoors and outdoors, which is so much a part of Durban lifestyle, that you can experience your home at different times of day and with different aspects of lighting, and also how the garden can become part of and interact with your home. And I didn't really even touch on garden landscaping, but I love designing gardens and I love creating the garden spaces for the houses I design. Maybe I should have been a landscape designer, I don't know. But I hope I've answered your question in some way, but I agree with you, these estates are incredibly restrictive. And, here in Plet now, everyone's moved from the Gauteng down to the coast after COVID. Not just to Plet, they've moved to Hermanus, they've moved to Cape, St. Francis, and these small village towns they're just burgeoned and growing and changing. And I kind of have to switch myself off because I get so, and I'm changing direction a bit here, I get so angry and annoyed, and I write articles to myself about some of the architecture that's happening in our main street and how developers sort of destroy the fabric of a place, and how little control we have over developers as such, which is one of my hobby horses, and I get really agitated about that. And then these gated communities with, again, these prescriptive rules, but it's what people want. That's what they aspire to. And that is also, I've done a lot of renovations in Mount Edgecombe for clients. And I find it so almost incestuous, the relationships that they have. They all live in each other's pockets, and they all, do you remember the book, The Stepford Wives? I don't know if anyone remembers reading that book about and these little picket fence gardens and the cloning and the copying and sometimes I just want to run away from it all. That's why I love living in Plet. I can go walk on the beach and I can just forget about it and just enjoy nature, which is kind of what my shift has been, as I just enjoy the natural landscape, enjoy where you live in the now, and that's really fun.
Playing with Bay is absolutely beautiful. Yeah, Mike, I don't know if I was seeing your hand. I think you raised it up and then got tired.
See Ambrose got his hand.
Okay. Prof, please. Prof Adebayo.
But he's
Please unmute.
Sorry,
Prof.
yeah. How do you forget? Nice to see you again, and I really enjoy your presentation. That shows the combination of your academia with the practice. I could see it because you use a topic of a sense of a place, and you take us through the journey. I see the sense of a place not only defining in terms of city alone, also defining inside of a place where people live. So that's why I see that your living room, the courtyard, the progression to the space is a sense of place. I really, really enjoy it. And a place also, when we talk a sense of a place, as you have interpreted, is also the environment in the place in which we live. This is more Africa, tropical, we want to enjoy outside. And what I also like in your the linkage of your landscape is what we can see. When you are in those living room, you can see the beauty of the green. Maybe if there's water, anything, sky behind, you can see it's not obstructed. So those type of a detail to me is what causes a sense of a place. When you look at it in a hierarchical way, from city down to building, down to the detail, down to the interaction of the people that live within the spaces. And I see the way you separate one in the left, one in the right, so that people can distribute themselves, and the people in the domain of centrality, which is part of the thing you show in the city, where you show a space in the center of the city. You also take that notion into the center of the space. I really enjoy, and I hope people could see all what I see, and I'm very happy to actually see that. I said I wish I could ask you to design a house for me myself. So thank you, Alethea. Nice to see you after a long time. And the issue of a female, I think there's always coming out in all the debate, and in most of the lecture I've done across the world, and in terms of gender issue, I've also supervised a lot of PhD on gender. And I think I like the action to an extent. I know because of our profession is more men dominated, but on the other hand, a lot of women has contributed greatly to the architecture. We must always be looking in terms of the contribution in which they have made to architecture, and not rather the person, how many people. You can have thousands of people and they can do nonsense. And you can have 3 people or 4 people, 10 people, and they can do great things. And I think that aspect is what I want us to be looking at. And because I also argue that in the university, or when you are in some place in which I was in a parliament recently to discuss when they don't choose enough people, female, when you are in a class, when you are examining students, and the script is front, but you don't know whether it's a female or male, you apply the same judgment. So what we argue for the world is that we should try as possible the equality, and the same judgment must be applied, so that there are more female in the profession than, because the population is more than the men. So that's the only thing, because this debate of women and all those things is good to talk in numbers, but also we must see the good work of female. If you know of one woman, Jane Drew, who did a lot of university in Nigeria, beautiful work he has done. I was with her, as external examiner in 1993 in Wits. And I was a boy when he was doing all those things. I managed to meet her. I met her and I was very happy. So those are the other dominant aspects that we must only constantly put in our mind. I really enjoy your lecture. It encapsulated all the good thing that one will be looking for in architecture. So thank you very much. Nice to see you again. All the best.
Thank you so much.
To your family. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate your kind words. And Skura, sorry, I omitted, when you say thank you to people, you've got to be so careful. I forgot to thank Michelle Jacobs. Without her in that library, she helped me. She's such a super sleuth. She helped find quite a lot of that information that I needed for my presentation because, as I said, it was all lost in the looting. And I really express such gratitude. And I don't know what you guys are going to do when she retires next year, but thanks, Michelle. Really, thank you so much. And Ambrose, thank you so much for your kind words. I really do appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, thank you to Michelle. I mean, at the library, you speak to Michelle, she goes straight to where the information is. Straight to it. I mean, it takes her no time. So really appreciate it, Michelle, your input to the profession. Any other words from anyone else? The Franschhoek house, Alethea, I find it quite airy and light. The windows are almost, like a facade, and it's not just a hole in the wall. They make up that building. But you say that there was portal frame there already when you designed.
So the long T, it's a T alphabet.
Yeah.
Here we go. It's basically a T-shaped house, but the long section, we haven't actually started building it. That's actually a render. And the portal is going to be, it's on a 5-meter module, and so that part is quite restrictive in a sense. But the other shorter sections, it doesn't have a portal at all because the client only made enough for the one section. He's a real cowboy. And the wife, she absolutely loves light and windows. And the bigger the windows, the happier she is. So it kind of was part of my design brief, is that I had to be airy and spacious and light. And that's what we tried to accomplish. So I'm glad you saw that in the design.
Yes.
Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
Thanks, Alethea.
And then the other thing is, Adema spoke about spaces between, and it's so relevant, I think. And in terms of the other, the places, the spaces that we live in and experience, but the spaces between, it's those fine nuances that we've really got to be aware of and fine tune ourselves to not letting things slip through the gaps. In other words, whether it's the way we design, the way we treat people, the way we live our lives, it's those little nuances that we really need to protect and look after. And I think that's kind of where, as I said earlier, I get so angry with developers because they have no respect for the spaces between, what is left, what they do to the harmony of the built environment. It upsets me no end. So the spaces between, I think, is just something to hold on to and always remember when you are designing and when you're living and being as an architect or a person.
Thank you, Alethea. Thank you for sharing your heart, but mostly how you did it with so much order. It reminds me how Professor Adebayo took my final document, which was all over the place, and gave it to you at some point to help me just mend the English, to just make it to look orderly and all that. Thank you so much, Alethea, for that. Now in South Africa, we have a huge problem with crime. When I first came to Durban in 1999, I was mugged. It was my first year here, from a small town of Flagstaff in the Eastern Cape, and I felt so vulnerable afterwards. I felt like I didn't want to get out of my room. I felt so vulnerable. I felt unsafe. I felt like it could happen again, And I'm bringing it back to a very personal situation for you, the looting incident. How do you rebuild from that? How do you start? How do you then look at everything that has happened and say, well, I can still live in this country. I can still regain my possessions that I lost? Because possessions is not just about you lost a chair. There's sentimental value in that, yes, but there's also that, I mean, I could lose anything if somebody can actually come and actually take anything they want. It's not about the price of the thing. It's the vulnerability that you feel when those things happen. So how do you move on from that?
Well, I think the mind is actually an interesting thing because it took me a year to realize I'd lost all my lecturing notes. It blanked it out completely. And the things we got back, everything was broken or the boxes had been ripped open and, everything was trampled on, as I said in my little journal entry that I spoke about. And I sort of put everything down. Our house that we now live in, which belongs to my husband's family, has the basement section, and all the things that we had left, just put them down there in one of the rooms, just put the things there, and sort of close the door and sort of, we'll deal with it when you're ready. And I'd go downstairs and I would sort of open a few things and look and think about it. And as I said, I really did not realize I'd lost my lecturing notes or my thesis, my master's thesis, or any of that stuff at all. My blind mind had completely blocked it out. And so a year later, when I was able to realize I'd lost those things, I'd actually already processed so much that it didn't actually make such it wasn't so raw. But I did cry for a week. I literally sat in the lounge every time my husband walked in, I was crying. And eventually I thought, no, you can't live like that. You can't live with this deep sense of loss, because what's it going to do to you for the rest of your life? You actually have to let it go. You actually have to find a way of letting it go. And I think living where we are now, which is, I'm talking about the beauty of the place, I'm not talking about the town or the people. It really helps you to escape. It helps you to say that the environment can be so exquisitely beautiful. You can live among such splendor. It's enough. It actually can be enough. It can replace the things you've lost. The natural beauty of walking on the beach, the everyday joy of finding a pansy shell on the beach, which is a little shell that you only find in Plet. And being with your family. You've got your family and you become stronger. I know for my daughter Claire, she had to go back to the village. She absolutely had to get that closure. She needed to go and find something, anything that belonged to us. It was really, really, for her, it was an identifying moment. And I did not want to go there. I did not want to go and see it. I forced my husband to go because I said, someone's got to go. I had to go back to Canada. You didn't go back and pack up all our stuff when we came back. Now it's your turn to go and look at and see what's left of our things. And there was of the possessions, we got a dining room table back. You got 3 of the chairs that went around the dining room table, and I got the dining room table back. So you you find joy in the things you've got left as well, which is it's how you've got to flip your brain. You've got to say it. A lot of people say, oh, Leith, it's just stuff. And eventually I said, no, it's not just stuff. We've moved from Durban. We were moving to Plet. I had already got rid of the things I didn't want. I only had the things I wanted left. And then I had to go, now I live in my mother-in-law's house with all her artwork, and she's long since deceased, and her furniture, and I certainly wouldn't choose to have it. But again, it's material things, so you kind of have to go with materiality of things too. You kind of have to start saying to yourself, well, it doesn't matter if I live in a little house, it's got no architectural flair. I have a view that's to die for.
Yeah.
So you've got to find the other. You've got to find the other things in that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry you had that experience. I never knew. We've all had a sense of vulnerability at stages in our lives through various, and it's horrible when it's forced on you as opposed to making a bad decision. As opposed when someone actually takes something away from you, and how do you journey through that? And writing helps, let me tell you. I find writing helps me immensely. And I love to write. And
yes, thanks for sharing the journal notes. Yeah, I don't know
because
what to call
it
it,
helps
poem,
you,
but yeah,
helps you
thanks
to
for sharing
forgive.
that.
Helps you to forgive. It really does. Helps you to, once you put it onto paper, kind of, like, I can deal with that now. I can deal with that now. You know, and even if it's not poetic and it's just your thoughts, just words that help you say the things you need to say. I mean, when I decided to reveal what I wrote, I hope I don't offend anyone. I hope I don't upset anyone. But I needed to do that for myself. I needed to explore my emotions and my vulnerability in order to let it go.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Alethea, for that. And because you're a person who's not scared of relocating or staying in another city or another country and all of that, how do you see yourself in architecture? I know that your role with academia is now less, and most people say, not that you are in retirement age at all, you are not. But how do you see your role in architecture? Do you want to just are you seeing yourself still very much involved for the foreseeable future and all of that? I mean, or you are planning to do something else going forward?
Well, my go-to has always been cooking. I've always had that other half of me, which is very important to me. And the irony about the looting is that when we were packing up from leaving Durban, we'd sold our home of 28 years, I started labeling the boxes. And the first things I packed up were my cookery books, which I have over 300. I'm rather embarrassed to admit. And I wrote in those boxes books. And my husband said to me, why are you writing, and when it comes to your point about architecture, why are you writing books and things on the boxes? Because someone might just steal them, not knowing what was going to happen. The irony is that none of those boxes were opened. The boxes had the words books on them, were not destroyed or opened. I mean, it's just something mind-blowing. Anyway, where do I see myself going from here? Well, I'm 65 now, to be honest. I'm allowed to have a little bit of retirement. But I still love being involved. I think you're an architect the day you die. It never leaves you. It's always part of you.
Yes.
You can't, I don't think any architects retire. I think we just carry on with the journey until such time as we can't be any longer. But I think what I'd like to perhaps do now that I'm living in a small town, you've got to actually watch yourself, because whatever you say gets so difficult. I'd like to get more actively involved in what is happening in this town and the wrong things for the wrong reasons. I think I need to perhaps become more engaged. As I said, between 2009 and 12, I literally completely switched off as an architect. I was burnt out, I was tired, and I needed to rethink my game plan. And I was lucky that my husband was working in the Free State, and Wally was then Professor Emeritus there. So I had someone like we used to meet up and chat, and used to visit us, and used to do things together. I just couldn't face it. I was really switched off. And I'm glad I had that break. And I think for any of you, if you find that you've reached that point of exhaustion for various reasons, you need to actually take the time to just go find yourself, get the balance right again. And so now, being older, you can actually, sometimes it's more important to start choosing what I do, as opposed to just doing everything that comes my way or crosses my desk. And I think as architects, we often get caught up in that because you've got to pay the school fees, is to start to be more selective about what one does and how one does it. And as I said, I'd love to design a small little house with lots of meaning and be evocative and lots of texture and character.
And colors.
These palaces that everyone wants, it just kind of actually becomes a bit passe, And it sounds, I don't want to be rude, but it can get a bit much sometimes. So I'm quite happy with my little house, as you saw. It's got its asbestos roofs, it's got steel windows, it's got nothing glorious.
You've
got
really
no,
bared your soul, Alethea. That is
it's got
amazing.
no double volumes. It's got nothing, but home. It's home.
Yeah.
And
So
I think if you lose,
a mechanic generally ends up with 5 or 4 cars. An architect hardly the same.
yeah, and I think when you lose like so much as we did, you start valuing the small. You start valuing the things that you have, and that you don't have to change everything all the time. And I think as architects, we always want to change everything. We want to change our environment. We want to make it more beautiful. We want to put our stamp on things. I've let go of that now a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe next time one goes to Platt for a holiday,
But come with it.
there will be a restaurant with your name. That will be something.
No, no. I tell you why. I've always said to everyone over the years, a lot of people say, oh, why don't you become, have a restaurant? Why don't you? I go, no, cooking is my passion. It's my pleasure. I do it because I love it. When you start becoming a business, then you're going to lose that. So, no. But come and have lunch. Come and sit on my veranda and have lunch with me anytime or dinner. You're welcome.
Okay.
Any of you. If you pass
Thank you, Alethea. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions? Comments?
I've seen lots of names. Nazarene, Jody. I saw Greg Townsend just now on the list.
Sbu, Dada, I had the same.
Yeah, lots of old students.
Former students of yours.
Yeah.
No, it's good to it's good to see everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it is good. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Sbu, you wanna say something? There you go. You wanna say something, Sbu?
Oh, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot. I don't know if you can hear me. I've got problems with my
Yes, we
audio.
can hear you very clearly.
Yes, no, nice to reconnect again, guys. It's been really quite a while, eh? many years. Yeah, so
I think Sibu's lost his sound, but what I want
we lost the signal. We lost the signal. But Alethea, thank you so much. We've learned a lot from your view on how you see architecture.
quite robust and very rich.
Oh, it's unstable. It's a cell phone signal, I think.
But there was just one more
Alethea
thing.
has actually to basically minimize.
So we're losing you now.
Maybe just write in a chat.
Joined a bit late, so I got in half.
It's the cell phone signal.
And it's very much very rewarding to
Okay, Alethea,
most of you guys, we haven't touched base in a long time.
Yeah,
thank you. Thanks a lot.
Good to reconnect. Good to reconnect. Unfortunately, we didn't hear everything. Your signal kept breaking.
Hey,
I'm saying we didn't hear everything. Your signal was breaking a bit. But thanks so much, man, for reconnecting.
I just wanted to mention, you mentioned about being an academic and what have you, and I've been so fortunate and grateful that I've been able to serve in quite a few of the validation panels now recently, and it just helps to reconnect and re-engage with academia and to see where the schools are going and the places and the way students are being taught and how teaching has evolved. And when we were teaching, we were still in that colonial paradigm, and history was taught from Egypt to modern movement, and you didn't diversify from that at all. You weren't allowed to. The dare suggest it's taught in any other way. It wasn't kind of permissible. And it's wonderful to see how, in particular, Wits University and UCT have sort of really become more inclusive in the way they teach history and theory, and how it's been so rewarding to see that how the schools are changing their direction and being so much more part of what is important and valuable to students' learning. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to serve on those committees. It's really been an eye-opener. And I served on the Caribbean School of Architecture on their validation panel as well, which was fantastic to be able to have that opportunity. It was all on Zoom. I didn't get to go. I went there on Zoom. I didn't get to go there in physical, real space. But even so, I thought I did get to go there. And yeah, it was just they're quite, in some ways, still teaching in an older methodology to sort of how we were teaching sort of 10 years ago, probably 20 years ago. But the quality and the kind of and the architecture that they produce in the Caribbean is fantastic. You should all have a look at it sometime. It's been also subtropical, and how the environment can impact, and the explorations that they do in the architecture, especially in the student level. I really found it really engaging and enjoyed every aspect of it. So I'm grateful I got to serve on that panel too. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with the academia. And if you want me to come back and give a lecture or two in the future, I'll happily come and speak to the students.
Yes, and share some recipes. Thank you so much, Alethea. I've definitely enjoyed your talk. I've enjoyed your journey. Thank you so much. Before we close, colleagues, anybody else would like to say something? Any question, maybe? I think we are good.
Thanks, Giro.
Any last words, Alethea? Yeah, any last words? Well executed. Any last words from yourself?
No. I just
good.
Ladies wear a bit of pink sometimes. You always have to be black. You don't have to wear the architect's uniform, black and white. You can wear pink.
Yes.
Be brave. Be brave.
Yeah, lovely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alethea. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Let's support the Springboks tonight.
Oh, is it tonight?
Against the All Blacks. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Alethea. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Alethea. Thanks, Pura. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Cheers, everyone.